Welcome to episode 11 of Walking Wisdom with me, Dr. Aman Bhonsle. Today I'm going to be addressing something that is on a lot of people's minds. All right, there's a lot of alarming news that is being funneled our way by several news outlets and channels, and we're getting affected by it. So I'm going to be discussing this in detail, and I hope you find some tips to cope with all the chaos that currently surrounds us. There have been a series of bleak and extremely distraught stories that have been making the rounds on social media. Videos of people a few days before they die of Covid-19. I've seen a few of these, and I thought I should address this with all of y'all who may have been witness to several such personal accounts of negligence, of lack of access to oxygen, of the sheer scale of this calamity that our country is currently going through. So I thought I should just share a few of my thoughts on this as I try to offer you some support and clarity. Now, this is not humanity's first pandemic, first war, or first dire situation that it has dealt with. What has been happening is this is the first disaster of its kind with this much universal coverage, with this much visibility, with this much sharing on social media platforms, whereby everyone can in some way or the other relate with the stories being told, or is getting directly affected emotionally by the visuals that are being shared on these platforms. And that can throw off even the best of us, the most resilient of us, even the ones who claim to have been victorious through several difficult situations, can find their bravery being tested, can find their emotions getting the better of them. I won't lie, some of these visuals of bodies floating in the river, a pregnant female doctor who recently died of COVID, who made a video before she died, an actor who said that his oxygen supply was faulty. All these visuals and stories and videos that are being shared with us on YouTube, on Insta, on Twitter, everywhere. It's hard to not get affected by this. It's hard to turn one's face away and watch another rerun of Friends on Netflix, or to pretend like all this isn't happening, or to just act like, oh, it doesn't affect me, I'm safe, or I'm vaccinated, or I'm rich. Because the country is bleeding, emotionally bleeding. Our resources, our machinery, the so-called responsible factions, everyone is hemorrhaging. So do we take names? Do we blame one individual, an entire faction, an entire group of people? Well, that may seem like the convenient thing to do. A lot of these problems, and I have said this before, are multi-layered and multifaceted. It's not just one individual who has been negligent. It is a series of events that take place. It's a series of oversights. It's a series of budgetary inconsistencies. It's a series of deadlocks that are caused by largely inept and lethargic bureaucracy. It's a sum total of all these factors. Recently, it was announced that vaccines for people below the age of 44 are going to be seized to be given in Maharashtra and in Karnataka because of shortages. Now, that's a logistical problem, and logistics can't be pinned on one person. There's an entire system that supports this kind of supply chain of vaccines based on the demand and based on how much do we actually have, how much are we producing, and how much has been sent out either prematurely or, or purely as a misstep. These are questions with no definite answers, and unless you are directly involved with the working of the government, and unless you directly understand the finer inner nuances of the healthcare system and why it's collapsing and why it's on its knees, and unless we understand these things, it's very difficult to point fingers and say, oh, it was this person or it was that person. Of course, there is a general consensus that this is largely an administrative problem, and that can sometimes feel like a burden that everyone is sharing now, that, oh my God, we have leaders who aren't looking at us, leaders who don't care about us. But while that is something you can't control right now, what you can control is what happens inside and how you process all this information and the attitudes that you form and you bring to the surface to deal with this. So let's jump right into the tips. The first tip is don't label yourself as weak or oversensitive or overly emotional or an overthinker if you are getting affected with the news. You're a human being. currently witness to a wave of human suffering unlike any other that you have probably witnessed in your life. Not just your life, even the older generations may admit that this situation feels far less familiar to them than anything that they may have gone through. All right. So my first tip is, don't be hard on yourself. Don't be cruel with yourself. Don't label yourself. Don't juxtapose all these titles on yourself. It's not needed. There's enough stress going around, and you don't need to add to that by looking at yourself in this way. All right, so don't judge yourself poorly or harshly. That's my first tip. My second tip is to limit the amount of morose and bleak data that you're subjected to, whether it's tracking statistics or new mutations or new strains or new symptom alerts. Don't constantly consume all this data and information, because what happens is with news, right? A lot of the news might later be revised or updated to reflect a far more balanced version of what's happening. So don't get excited at every new development, because some developments are here to stay while some developments are transitionary. So don't become excitable, and please limit your consumption of the news however you are consuming it. My third tip is for you to connect with people you love and who offer you support. Now, for a lot of y'all, support is hard to find in your homes. Maybe you don't have a very good relationship with your siblings, your grandparents, or your parents. So it's important to stay connected to a tribe or a community of like-minded individuals centered around a certain hobby or interest or topic. And as long as I have this rule in my groups, as long as you stay away from religion and politics, most people won't feel like their cages are being rattled. So, the old saying that your tribe defines your vibe, or that your vibe attracts your tribe. This is very important, because you might be socially distancing or by yourself, but it's very important to connect with friends who uplift you, friends who motivate you, and friends who just put a smile on your face. And try doing this on a daily basis. Listen to their stories, invest some time in learning about how they are coping with it as well, and you won't feel as isolated, as alone as you are probably feeling right now. My fourth tip to you is to get some serious exercise time in as a part of your schedule. 1 hour, 20 minutes, 30 minutes, 15 minutes, 10 minutes, whatever works for you based on your level of fitness and whatever form of exercise you enjoy. You want to do HIIT, HIIT workouts, Zumba, yoga, you want to lift weights, do stretches, do strength training, or do a simple cardio walk like I do. Do it, because that releases endorphins known as happiness hormones. It'll definitely elevate your mood and make you feel a little more in control of your body, your mind, and your fate as a result of that. So do not ignore the need to exercise. Otherwise, you just sit around, gestate, put on weight, feel terrible about your body, and you eat all that junk food, and that makes you lethargic. That affects your productivity, that affects your self-esteem, and then that is a vicious circle that's hard to get out of. And my last tip is to read more books. All right, Amazon, to my knowledge, is delivering books, and you will receive your book a little late, but you will receive it. I suggest reading books that fall under the themes of self-actualization, leadership, dealing with calamities, and just sort of hacking into your mind and the way you think, the way you have traditionally operated, the cultural values that you hold close. I'm a big fan of history, psychology, and life coaching books that sort of give me various perspectives to sort of mull over and think about, so that I don't stagnate in my understanding of what people have been doing in the world of psychology, in the world of life coaching, in the world of self-help. So I try to make a little time to read. Some days are easier than others, and some days you're lazy, you're like, all right, I don't want to read. But I try to get at least 4 or 5 pages read of a book of my choice. At least 4 to 5 times a week at the minimum. And sometimes I read a lot longer. And admittedly, recently I've been spread a little thin, but never underestimate the value of a good book. New ideas entering your mind, all right, that kind of just infuses you with a new enthusiasm and understanding of situations. And that, in my opinion, is priceless and valuable, far more than any advice given to you by a video like this is a book, because it's compressed knowledge. It's sort of been filtered out, sorted out, and organized for your understanding. So buy a book, finish it, then buy another book. Make books your companions through this crisis. I assure you it will leave you slightly different than when you first started reading the book. You will evolve as new ideas enter your psychological terrain. Now, some of these tips may seem simple, may seem obvious, but all the same, I hope they help you cope. There's a lot of distressing news out there, and I want you to know that you're not the only one getting affected by it. All of us are succumbing in one way or the other to these stories and getting emotionally stirred. But what you can do is keep your mask on, keep your head straight and focused, and try to support whoever you can. But most importantly, don't forget to support yourself, all right? That's it from me. Thank you for listening.